Employee motivation, financial and non-financial techniques of staff motivation. Do not forget to like, share and subscribe and ring the bell for more videos. Read this article to learn about employee motivation, financial and non-financial techniques of staff motivation. Regardless of which theory of employee motivation is followed, the research studies on motivation conclude that interesting work, appreciation, pay, good working conditions, and job security are important factors in helping to motivate. For enhancing motivation in your organization, first study the following. A. An analysis of what motivates individual staff members. B. The performance objectives of the individual. C. The strategic goals of the organization. Advertisements. D. The values and culture of the organization. After above actions, devise the techniques. The techniques can be of two types, financial and non-financial. Financial incentives. Techniques of motivation. Financial techniques refer to monetary rewards. Incentives are nothing but the inducements provided to employees in order to motivate them. There should be direct relationship between efforts and rewards. Financial reward should be substantial in value and must be in parity with others. Underpaying staff sends the message that your firm doesn't value their work. Money is not a prime motivator, but this should not be regarded as a signal to reward employees poorly or unfairly. Advertisements. The financial incentives include 1. Pay and allowances. It includes basic pay, grade pay, and dearness allowance, traveling allowance, pay increments, etc. Good pay and allowances help the organization to retain and attract capable persons. However, good pay and allowances need not motivate all the people, especially who are enjoying security of job in government organizations, and those for whom corruption is a way of life. Some of the other issues are associated with bad attitudes, grievances, absenteeism, turnover, poor organizational citizenship, and adverse effect on employees' mental and physical health. 2. Incentive pay. Advertisements. Incentive pay plans are meant to increase output, which can be measured quantitatively. For incentive plan targets, the employees must have confidence that they can achieve the targets. 3. Gain sharing. It is a reward system in which team members earn bonus for increasing productivity or reduce wastages. To illustrate, if the wastage is reduced from 5% to less, the benefits may be shared equally with the team. 4. Profit sharing. It means sharing of profits with the employees by way of distribution of bonus. Profit sharing plan has its shortcomings. 1. That it has become a regular feature in government departments irrespective of performance, and 2. It may have no relation with individual efforts. 5. Stock options. Many companies use employee stock options plans to compensate, retain, and attract employees. These plans are contracts between a company and its employees that give employees the right to buy a specific number of the company's shares at a fixed price within a certain period of time. Advertisements. Employees who are granted stock options hope to profit by exercising their options at a higher price than when they were granted. In India, stock options have primarily been used as a retention tool for a more selective group of employees. 6. Retirement benefits. It includes the accumulated provident fund, gratuity, leave encashment and pension. The provision of terminal benefits provides assurance to employees during the service for their future. Non-financial incentives techniques. Non-financial incentives do not involve money payments. These are also important in motivating employees as they bring in psychological and emotional satisfaction to them. These include so many techniques. People do work for money, but they work even more for meaning in their lives. In fact, they work to have fun. Advertisements. Some of the important non-financial incentives include 1. Job security. Nothing can motivate a worker appointed temporarily better than provision of job security. Even if a temporary worker puts in greater efforts, lack of job security will always pose a threat. If such a worker is given job security, he will be more committed to the organization. 2. Challenging work. Workers, who are dynamic in nature, do not show preference for routine jobs. They are always ready to accept challenging assignments. Challenge can be brought through mentoring, job redesigning, job enlargement and job enrichment. Understand the capabilities of every individual in the organization and accordingly assign him work. 3. Recognition. It is important that the employer recognizes hard work. Even a word of appreciation from him would motivate the employees to maintain the same level of performance or do even better. Employees ranked a personal thank you as the most sought-after form of recognition, followed by a handwritten note of appreciation from the boss. 4. Better job titles. Advertisements. Job titles do matter. Employees do show preference for certain designations. A salesman, for example, would like to be designated as a sales executive and a sweeper to be sanitary inspector. 5. Opportunities for advancement. There should never be a stagnation point for any employee during the prime time of his career. The employer must always provide opportunities for his employees to perform well and move up in the hierarchy. 6. Empowerment. To stimulate an employee is his involvement in certain crucial decisions. For example, if the management decides to buy new machinery for the factory, the workers' viewpoints may be secured before making the final decision. The management should avoid unilateral decisions on such matters. 7. Competition. The management can encourage healthy competition among the employees. This would, certainly, motivate them to prove their capabilities. The management can also rank the employees according to performance. Such of those employees who have performed very well may be given merit certificates. 8. Job rotation. By job rotation we mean that the employees will be exposed to different kinds of job. This certainly would break the monotony of employees. For example, in a bank an employee may work in the savings bank section for some time, after which he may be posted to the cash section. Such a change not only motivates the employees to perform well but also prepares him to be versatile. 9. Lead by example. Be passionate and energetic. Leaders should demonstrate the attitudes, values, actions, and mindsets that they want among their staff. Leaders are always considered as role models. 10. Encourage the use of humor and creativity. Advertisements, incorporating humor into the workplace, can alleviate stress and create a more positive environment for everyone. Strategies to enhance humor include having a daily cartoon or joke sent to all staff via email, encouraging laughter, finding fun in events that did not turn out as planned or expected, etc. 11. Treat your people as human beings, neither inferior nor superior. Show trust and respect. Motivate them for creativity. Create a safe-to-risk environment. Keep them informed of relevant developments inside the organization. Mistakes be treated as learning tools instead of blaming them. Act as an advocate for their employees and be a visible champion for them. Provide resources and support required by staff to complete their jobs. Promote and provide two-way feedback. Address stress and burnout, and implement work-life balance initiatives.